is visceral fat made up of the same sacs that I would find in my subcutaneous fat?
It's no, it's actually kind of a different location altogether, and it behaves very differently. So visceral fat is far more inflammatory. In fact, that's part of the problem. You know, if we do a DEXA scan on a person, which is how you can measure some of this stuff, you do a DEXA scan on a person that weighs 200 pounds that has 25% body fat. So by definition, based on those numbers, they have 50 pounds of fat. But let's assume that of that 50 pounds of fat, the visceral fat is 5 pounds. So 10% of their fat is visceral. That 5 pounds of visceral fat is wreaking all the damage in their body. The 45 pounds of fat that is not visceral, totally inert.
Okay, let me describe it in a layperson's way. So subcutaneous fat is water inside of a water balloon. Visceral fat is water on your sweatshirt.
Yeah.
And your sweatshirt now is just fucking wet and nasty.
Yeah, think about the bathtub analogy, right? The subcutaneous fat is the water in the bathtub. It's totally fine. The visceral fat, or peripancreatic or intramuscular or intrahepatic fat, is when it gets out and starts leaking through your floors.
So it's the same stuff.
It's the same stuff.
Just one is in its rightful container and the other, it's just glommed onto something.
That's right.
That is really interesting.
So for example, in the muscle, what does that fat do that's so destructive? It impairs the signal of insulin. Not to get terribly detailed, but you like the mechanism, right? Insulin hits a receptor called the insulin receptor. That insulin receptor triggers a cascade, a chemical cascade in a muscle cell that tells a glucose transporter to move up to the cell and allow glucose to come in. That's the way it's supposed to work. When you have fat inside the muscle cell, that signal gets broken. That's the first sign of insulin resistance. And the body says, hey, I need to get rid of this glucose. I need to get this glucose into the muscle. That's where we store glucose. I can't. I need more and more insulin to do this. And eventually you run out of ways to do that. So initially you can make the glucose go away, but you need more insulin. Eventually all the insulin in the world doesn't do it. The glucose goes up. That's called type 2 diabetes.